Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Today, this massive structure stands as a terrifying monument to one of man's first attempts at the humane punishment of criminals. When it opened nearly 170 years ago, it was hailed throughout the world as an architectural marvel and a model for prison reform. Its founders were attempting a radical social experiment where inmates would be confined to their cells for their entire sentence, serving their time in total isolation and absolute silence. The sinners would be left only with the Bible and their inner thoughts, free to return to their innate goodness. And from this goal of penitence, the word penitentiary was born. But over time, idealism collided with reality, and Eastern State evolved into a nightmarish holding pen for notorious names like Al Capone and Willie Sutton. It became the scene of daring escapes, bloody riots, and gruesome murders.
If you come in and you kept your nose clean and didn't do this and didn't do that, you had no problems. But if somebody told me what they're going to do to me, I'd say, sorry, buddy, I come from the same neighborhood as you. I'll break every bone in your... And I meant it.
They'll try to act like tough guys. And I used to say, don't put your gorilla suit on. Because if you try it, you got to wear it all the time, and I don't think you're that bad. There's a lot of bad people in here that will knock your head off in a minute if you jump in their face.
They had blood all over the place. They had blood in this corner, the walls were covered with blood. The floor, the wall, and all, the yards were covered with blood, and they wouldn't wash it down for 3 or 4 days to make sure everybody saw the blood.
But despite all the problems, Eastern State's leaders always maintained their good intentions and struggled to strike a balance between reform and retribution, between punishment and brutality, and between rehabilitation and driving men insane. The humane punishment of criminals. Until the 1700s, the concept was of little concern. Punishment of lawbreakers usually consisted of public humiliation, banishment, mutilation, torture, or the gallows. The idea of serving time as punishment had not yet been developed. Jails were filthy holding pens for criminals waiting to be tried or to receive their punishment. All types of criminals were thrown together in these dungeons, making jails schools for vice, where petty criminals learned from the hardened inmates. Little provision was made for the care and feeding of convicts, and disease was rampant. Typhus, or jail fever, was a common killer of prisoners.
When these prisoners were brought to court, they infected juries and judges and the police. And so there was quite a bit of alarm. And the thrust now was to clean up the prisons.
The man often called the father of prison reform is the Englishman John Howard. In the 1770s, he toured Europe's jails and called for cleaning up the prisons. He concluded that it is essential for all prisoners to have separate rooms for hours of thoughtfulness and reflection. However, while inspecting a jail in Russia, Howard, too, contracted jail fever and died in 1790. In America, the Pennsylvania Quakers were at the forefront of prison reform. Colonial Governor William Penn had himself been imprisoned in England for his religious beliefs. He dedicated himself to creating a more humane method of punishment by imposing prison sentences and eliminating the death penalty. In 1776, a group of prominent Pennsylvania citizens founded the Philadelphia Society for Alleviating the Miseries of Public Prisons. Members included such influential leaders as Benjamin Franklin and Dr. Benjamin Rush. They studied John Howard and espoused the Quaker ideal of man's innate goodness. They felt that total solitude combined with labor and religious study would reform prisoners. They lobbied for the construction of a large new penitentiary designed and built specifically to carry out this experimental philosophy.
The request for proposals went out, and this was a competition for a $100 prize to design the Eastern State Penitentiary. And it finally came down to two architects, William Strickland and John Haviland. And the younger, lesser-known architect, John Haviland, won the commission and got the $100 prize for his design.
Haviland's blueprint called for 250 cells arranged in 7 cell blocks. These hallways would be built as spokes radiating from a central hub. This floor plan would provide a convenient viewing area to keep watch on the entire prison. The cornerstone was laid on May 22, 1823, on a site known as Cherry Hill, about 2 miles outside the city. The project would take 13 years to complete, but when it was finished, the prison would stand as the largest public structure in the United States.
By the 1820 standards, Eastern State Penitentiary is absolutely massive. It's nearly 11 acres on the inside of the walls. The outside walls are half a mile around. They are 30 feet high and 8 feet thick at the base. And so this was said to be the most expensive building in the United States at the time that it opened, at a cost of $770,000.
On October 25, 1829, while many of the cell blocks were still under construction, inmate number 1 was led to his cell. He was an 18-year-old farmer by the name of Charles Williams, sentenced to 2 years for stealing a $20 watch, a $3 gold seal, and a gold key. Eastern State's founders were unwavering in their commitment to the humanity and effectiveness of their methods and adopted painstaking measures to ensure the isolation of the prisoners. When a new inmate arrived, a black hood was placed over his head and he was led to his cell. The hood prevented the convict from knowing the prison's layout and kept him from seeing or being seen by other inmates. Once locked in the cell, he remained there for the duration of his sentence. The cells were relatively large, 7.5 feet by 12 feet, allowing the prisoner room to work on crafts like weaving or shoemaking. Each cell was equipped with a flush toilet and central heating. Eastern State was the first large-scale building in the country to include these amenities. Covered with heavy oak doors and meal. Tiny skylight for ventilation,